evening, my loves. Welcome back to another segment in Tiffany's story in bringing awareness and healing to others. That is my mission. So I always want to start my videos out by showing my love and appreciation for your love and appreciation. Thank you for your consistent support and love and your encouraging words. It means more than what you even know. It really does. This is not an easy journey, but it must be done to bring about change, right? And I'm all about change. It ends with me, okay? My pain will not be in vain. Amen. Okay, so the last segment that we discussed, 2 segments on my mother. Now we've discussed plenty of her back history and anything from the prostitution allegations, the back history with her and our relationship in all shapes and forms, right? So now it's time to get into the enabling parent who has narcissistic traits as well, my father. And we're going to talk about that and how things made a turn, how he came from being my hero to now a bully in itself. And also we're going to speak on what led me down the path of suicide. We'll also get into that. Let's begin, shall we? So my father, so let's start from the beginning with him. Let's start by saying that my father was my world. He was indeed my hero without a shadow of a doubt. My father was all that I had growing up. Yeah, I have my supportive uncles and things, but I'm talking about in aunts and uncles. I'm talking about within my household when it came to my physically, mentally, and emotionally narcissistic, abusive mother. Okay, he was all I had. So my father raised us in church. A lot of people know my father to be a minister. My father was heavy in the word, and he kept us in church. I grew up in church. I've been in church since I've been old enough to comprehend what church was. Okay, so you name it. We've been to every service from revival service, Monday through Friday, through Sunday, through Friday, through and over and over and over again. You get the point, right? And this man is one of the reasons why that I know so well the phrase, honor thy mother and your father, right? This would be a part of a scripture that has been deeply embedded into my mind and would also, in my circumstances, be a ball and chain to me as well. Because yes, we do want to honor our mother and father if they are truly mothers and fathers. But no one talks about children like such as myself who have nothing that is worthy of honor when it comes to parents, right? But this man taught me everything I knew. He is a part of my kindness. He has taught me to do the right thing. He's taught me to stand up for what's right, no matter if it's sometimes it's the hardest thing to do. All of these things my father has embedded into me. So understand that in my household, I had my mother who was abusive and not the best. And then there was my father who was like, in my sense, I felt like it was my mom who was the devil on my shoulder, constantly beating me down. And then there's my father in my eyes as a child, as my angel, my saving grace, if you will. But knowing what I know now, of course, it's just me being a kid, right? A naive kid who wants to think that their dad is a superhero, right? What kid wouldn't want to, right? But I'll get into how he tarnishes that image in my mind. And we'll go from there. So my father, I recall in our household, he was very, he was like a big kid to us, like a really good man in my eyes, who was an outstanding guy. He was very likable. Everyone liked him. He was a very gentle soul, right? But he didn't play, when it came to us and things of that sort. So there was discipline in the house on his end, but he was very easygoing. He was always actively involved with me and my brothers, you know, which I explained in my last segments, that my mother was totally opposite. My father was very much engaged with his children. You would see that in our small little town that we were raised in Cambridge, Maryland, that a lot of people were like, you know, they're like the baby ducklings. You can't see him without seeing his children. He was that kind of guy. So, of course, I grew a great attachment to him. And with all the toxicity that was going on with my mother, and when she had her affair and things drove me away from her and her abuse, and it led me into the arms of my father, hence why I became a daddy's girl, right? So, understand that I had a bond with him that was beyond just him being my dad. Like, I watched him go through some really hard moments in his life with my mother, and seeing those things even when he wasn't in that moment, if it makes sense. While he was away, I've seen the things that he's had to go through behind his back, you know, things of that sort. So I felt for my father. I had a strong bond with my dad, right? So as I got older, I started to realize that my father is just as much a problem as my mother. Now, he's always been supportive, always proud of me, always, you know, team Tiff and whatnot. Never really had anything bad to say about my dad. I was super protective of my father, and I would bash anybody that ever said anything about him. Hands down, he was my first love, which every girl's father should be a good dad, right? And I thought that he was to me. Now, as I moved out of the house and not realizing that my father was entertaining all the rumors that we talked about in the last segment with me being a prostitute and things of that sort, it was very heartbreaking, but yet I was still in a sense of denial with my dad. Very much so. I refuse to believe that my father, the man that taught me everything that I know and every part of my being, of who I am, kind, loving, supportive, gentle to others, could be a walking contradiction. That is a hard pill for me to swallow. I tell people all the time that it is easier, as evil as my mother is, that it's easier to grasp her doing, because she's been doing and abusing me since I was a kid, right? My dad is a little different for me because I've always seen him in a different light because of my mother's abuse. But I guess so much it was more of me being such a target in my mom's world that it blinded me from the truth. So anything like they say the grass looks greener on the other side. Well, my dad was my greener grass. So I guess in a sense I could be blinded by that, when in reality both my parents are toxic. Now my father is a victim in his own right as well. But I always tell people, when you are a victim and then you start victimizing your own children, then you are no better than the person that's doing the abusing as well. So I remember when I was in the Navy, and I heard that my father had got wind of these things, and I was like, there's no way that he could be entertaining this. And little did I know that he did, but I always wondered why he never approached me about it. You see in the show that he plays to be the concerned dad. Now my father, if anybody knows my father, is a very straightforward man. He's straightforward with everyone else, but he can't be straightforward with my mother. It's a different dynamic with them two and their marriage. But he's very straightforward. Tell it like it is type of man. Don't care how you feel about it. So he would exercise the same thing with me. So if there really was room for concern, trust and believe my father would call me. But that's a part of my heartbreak as well. It was in that point where my mother was controlling everybody around her that she could. She would also take out of my world the pieces that I consider to be my world. And my dad was one of those biggest pieces in my world. My mother was very envious of my relationship with my father, which I believe I spoke about in my other segment. So, which I never understood how a mother could be jealous of a bond between her child and the father that helped bring them in this world. That's what you should want. That's what I want. And my time comes to bring my kids in the world, right? Well, it's different. There's my brothers and there's me. She saw me as a threat. So not only was she trying to isolate me from everybody in my family, she wanted the one thing that she knew that would rip me apart was my father. And she worked her magic and she did it so well. But it took the day that I sat down with my father. My father wanted to know, and this is what's leading up to the show, what led to the show, right? Before the show was even ever a thing. I was a full-time student as well, and I was working full-time. So what I would do is I would go to work from 8 to 5 every day, 8 to 5, go to class, 6 to like 9, 10 o'clock at night, right? So my father would call me occasionally. Me and my father would talk every day. Every day we would talk about things. I mean, there was no boundaries, nothing. I was an open book to my father, and he'd give his words of wisdom. I say wisdom now because it's the same thing. He doesn't take his own advice. But I remember one night he just asked me, like, why are you this way with your mother? And my father plays, oblivious to what's going on. He's in a great sense of denial. I just think that he just refuses to deal with it. I think it's his escape by living in denial, because he's witnessed the abuse too on several occasions. So he's aware that it's true. He just refuses to address it with me. So he asked me. I was on my way home from school, college at the time, and I remember driving home, and I sat in front of my home in my car for a couple of hours. And I'm like, yeah, in my mind, I'm like, yeah, you're in a great sense of denial. Yeah, we're going to play like you don't know what's going on. And I'm just going to start from the beginning, right? So I start from the beginning, and I tell him everything, like I'm talking to you guys. Everything, and I, in a sense, am telling my father this because in my eyes, my father is like the calm in the storm. My mother is the storm and he's the calm. And I'm thinking like maybe he could get through to her. This is before Dr. Phil show ever came in the picture in my mind, right? Just wanting somebody to hear me. Why not my father, right? So I break everything down to this man about my mother, even though he already knew this, right? So at the end of all that, I'm confident in him, and he's like got me feeling like, yeah, maybe there might be a talk about this with my mom, and maybe we can come to some resolution, go to counseling, see what's going on, because I'm tired, and at that time I was about, I think, 31. So that's like 2 years ago. So my dad's like, okay, I love you, good night. Now, the very next day, when I get home from school, my father calls me and just sums it all up after listening to his daughter for hours talk about her hurt and her pain and the abuse she endured at the hands of his wife and her mother. His way to sum it all up was, Tiffany, I know he called me, you're a liar, you're demonic. And these were his exact words. You're mentally ill. And I remember screaming at the top of my lungs in my own place, in my townhome, like, fuck you, excuse my language, like exactly how it came out, but it was louder than that. And it wasn't coming from a place of like, oh, in my mind, let me think of the most foulest thing to say, because that's not in my nature. I'm kind, I'm gentle. But it came from like the pits of my soul. And this was more like I'm hurt, like complete and instant heartbreak. Like this man is my world. And he's never, ever addressed me in that manner. Never, ever dismissed my feelings. And this is when things start to take a turn, when you hear your man, the man that you held up here, knowing that he's not perfect, but that all the things he does doesn't fall in line with that. Everybody's not perfect. This is just toxic, okay? So imagine your vision in your head from childhood up and now, your dad being a hero. I talk about my dad all the time. Everybody knows that. I love my dad. I love my father. And to hear the man, your first love, tell you that you are a demon, you are demonic, and you are a liar, and you're mentally ill, and completely dismiss all 2 hours worth of conversation, 2 hours plus conversation of your story, the same story I give you here on my platform. He dismissed every bit of that, and he told me I needed help. And after I screamed what I did, I belted out what I did, I remember hanging up the phone. And it was at that point where I was about to be in the darkest place of my life. A lot of people say, well, you've been through a lot, and it's a miracle that you haven't been in that dark place a long time ago. But understand, once again, my dad was all I had. This is the same man that I've watched over the years and experienced the hardships with him. He has his share in his own story with his marriage and what he'd been through, but I was there, eyewitness to those in my birth. This has been going on, to my understanding, long before I was born. But now I'm born in the midst of this toxicness, and there's abuse, and I'm understanding about watching what he's going through and being a part of that too, being a victim too alongside of him in this. I've created such a bond with this man. This is the same man that upheld a home, a 3-story home, when my mother took her income out and she abandoned us and left us with nothing, took the car, took everything with her and left us with nothing. Like I said in the last segment, this is the same man that I had to ride bikes with as a little girl. Me and my brothers with backpacks on our backs in the snow for miles to ride to a grocery store just to put food in the house, put them in your backpacks and go home with, and lighten kerosene heaters up because there's no heat in the house, because you can see your breath, and all of these things because your wife and my mother abandoned us. Yeah, he's a part of it too. So yes, he's a victim in his own right. But when in that moment, I'm thinking about all of these things coming to my head, like, how could you? Like my heart, I could not even describe to you the feeling on that day. And I fell into the darkest place that I never wish to go to ever again. Imagine me. Yeah, a lot of people say, I could never see that, Tiffany. Yeah, you never seen it, but nobody saw the nights after that of me coming home to my 4 walls where I didn't sleep. Or sometimes I sleep, and sometimes I sleep all day just to escape my thoughts in the dark, crying myself to sleep. And then slowly, I started to lose a lot of weight. I was very, very small. I'm petite now, but I was very, very small. This is my happy weight. But I was very tiny, and not realizing that I wasn't eating. Like, I had went a whole day without eating. Excuse me, and it didn't bother me. Like, this is how dark it got for me. I closed myself off from everybody, the world. But when I came out at the world, it was only because I had to school and things of that sort. You wouldn't know. That's high functioning depression at its finest. I am that. That's, when they say check on your happy-go-lucky friends and all. I'm one of those people, and I had people checking in on me. But I wasn't checking in on me. I had checked out. And when I say checked out, I started to entertain the thought of not being here. And we're not going to dance around the word. We're going to say it. Because this is my story, right? This is my truth. And suicide is something also that we don't talk about at all, especially in the Black community. And after my father did what he did, I felt like I had nothing left. Like my mother had managed to literally turn everybody from her side of the family, my siblings, and now my father, right? I don't have anything to live for. Like, Lord, what is my purpose here? Because I'm not seeing it. And I would have days where I would literally have to get myself together because the thought of waking up infuriated me. Like, God, why did you choose me to live another day? Just take me. I prayed so much that the Lord would just take me in my sleep. I thought about ways that I could have taken myself out. I entertained this so much that I was ready, that I had accepted death, and I was ready to be at peace. That was my peace for me. To know that a parent who birthed you too, that could, and know that you have driven your child to the state of suicide, yet it not be enough to make you want to change, is evil in itself. I tell people all the time, like I said on the show, my mother is a difference between being mentally ill and being evil. My mother is very narcissistic. She is evil in itself. And I didn't want to live anymore. I didn't value anything anymore. I didn't value life like the Tiffany that was very optimistic and found peace and joy and the good, and even in the worst situation. Couldn't find the good in this. You snatched the last good thing I thought I had away from me. And it was already enough that I was in codependent relationships and abusive relationships. And I was just in one in that moment where I thought that they loved me in the midst of this toxicness, and that they were abusing me mentally and emotionally too, and broke my heart. So that not knowing that that was going to follow on top of what I was going through, that was it. I lost it. I lost every part of myself. I stopped taking care of myself. I stopped doing things that made Tiffany happy. And I stayed and I wallowed in this for a while. And then when you get to a point, it is absolute point of desperation, my loves. When you start reaching out to people and it's a cry for help, and it's beyond, your mother and father and them. I've attempted to do that. Nobody's listening to me. Besides my dad's side that understands who my mother is, they don't support. They're very supportive of me. But let me tell you something. When you have a mother like that in your world that snatches everything from you, and you've been everything to her, you gave her the world, and yet it not be enough, yes, I felt like I wasn't enough for anybody. And it showed in my relationship. I didn't feel like I was enough. And I was like, I need help. I need help. This is a cry for help. This is my last attempt before I follow through with this. And then nobody has to worry about me. And I say this with all the sincerity in the world. I was done. I was done. So I just remember being on that couch in the dark while in my sorrows, and I'm just crying for help. Like I was on Facebook, you'll see the post on the Dr. Phil show. I was reaching out to Ayala. I was reaching out to anybody that I felt would listen to me. So there were other people before Dr. Phil. And I just entertained the thought, never thinking anything of it. I just needed to get this out. I need somebody to help me. So why not? People ask how you got there. Why not? When you go to your mother's side of the family and you try to explain it, and the only thing you get in return after explaining the abuse, the emotional, the physical trauma that you endured and still enduring, this is not just the past, it's still your present. Your past is still your present. And after saying all of that, all you get is, well, that's still your mother. That's still your mother, and you only get one. Do you know how hurtful that is to people who do say that? If you are watching, it is the worst thing you could ever say to a child who has been abused. Doesn't matter how old they are. It is very dismissive, and it does not help. And it didn't help me. So I was trying. And finally, I remember Like, I wasn't thinking anything like, what are the chances? What are the odds that any of these people that are up here, going to notice little old me? And I put in the email. He paraphrased it in the show, but I put in the email that I was suicidal. And I meant every word of it. I was crying. It was a desperation. It was a sense of desperation, obviously, to end up on national TV. That's how bad it was for me. And I remember going to school that maybe about a little bit later down the road. I'm going to my classes, my night classes, and I get an email, and it's just like, hey, this is such and such from the Dr. Phil show. And I'm like, it's got to be spam. Like, this is not real. Like, who wants to hear me? Who wants to hear my pain and my story, my crazy parents and my abusive parents? Like, there's so many other kids in the world. Like, why me? And they chose me. Well, I guess who wouldn't choose your mother, So we managed to talk to the producers. I talked to the producers, and I made it clear. A lot of people don't know this, but I did not want my parents on the show. This going on the Dr. Phil show was never about my parents. Like, it was about them because of what they did to me, but it was not about them. Like I say, this is not about them. What I'm doing to bring awareness and all that, it's not about them. It's about them, but it's not about them. The bigger picture here is to heal people, right? It's the same thing with the show. It was for me to save myself. There was an attempt for me to save myself. And it was my last cry for help before I decided to end it all, right? To end all the pain. And yeah, it was, I let the producers know that. Like, I'm here to save myself. I don't even care about the relationship anymore with them. I'm hurting and I don't know what to do anymore. I am all out of options. And the last option is looking pretty good to me. So somebody's going to have to convince me that it's not worth it. And they talked, and of course, they wanted to have her on there. Why not? They want to see, if they can help bring this family together. And if you got to listen to a story like that, why would you not want her on the show, right? So the producers talked to my parents. They usually change their number when they get mad at me and disown me, but they managed to keep that line, and the producers got through to them. And I get a phone call back like, hey, by the way, we are, your mother is coming on the show, has agreed to come on the show. And I'm like, how in the world did you manage to do that? How did you manage to do that? So your father is pretty easy. Now, my father's a fan of the Dr. Phil show, and I know how he was so easy to go because he's brainwashed. He's brainwashed by her. So in his mind, he's going to get the solution. He's going to the Dr. Phil to resolve this issue. Yeah, let's get to the bottom of this. I don't know why my daughter's crazy. I want Dr. Phil to see this so that he can let her see how insane she is, and we can get to the bottom of why she treats her mother the way she treats her, or doesn't talk to her mom. So that's his train of thought. I know my father enough to know that. So of course it's easy for him to go. He wants to say, if all these things are true that your mother is saying, it should be a problem for all us to go. So he's thinking in that mind, and then really your wife has brainwashed you, lied to you, and everything else. So she, of course, was reluctant. Of course, if you knew you were an abusive mother and a liar and amongst all type of things, conniving, deceitful, you name it, she is, why would you want to go on national TV and make yourself look what you really are? A horrible person, a horrible mother, just a horrible being, period. But they managed to convince her to come. So she came, and they got our tickets together. And so it was happening. We were on our way to Hollywood. So my parents would go first. But before that, we endured a lot of mess, me and my brother. My brother decided to come on as the last thing. It was really going to be me, my dad, and my mom. But my brother came on as well on the show to support me. He said, I'm tired of everybody picking on my sister. I know this stuff to be true. I'm coming to support you. And it was like a really bond moment, twins bonding. We are twins. So it meant a lot to me that my brother came to support me. So that's how he ended up on the show. He wasn't originally planned to be on there, but he wanted to come support, so he came. So they flew us out separately. I was still in Virginia. They were in Georgia, my brother included. So they flew my parents out first. And then they flew out because, nobody wants a confrontation. I hadn't seen my parents in months. Like I had went completely no contact and talked to nobody. So this will be my first time seeing any of them in a long time. But we wouldn't see each other until the show aired. So until we got on the show to shoot the show, it is. But we came to LAX, and right from the airport we were taken to the studio. And after that, my parents, I assume, have already done their interviews. They're already been sent back to their hotel. It's my brother's already there, and I'm the last person to get to the set to shoot our interviews. So they had just wrapped up with him, and they're getting me together so that I can sit in the seat and tell my story in the interviews that you see on Dr. Phil's show. When I say that it took me forever to get myself together, I say that the makeup crew came and fixed my makeup several times throughout my interview. It was very raw for me in that moment because it was my first time ever saying this, hearing myself say this out loud. I say it to my friends and stuff, but I never really listened to myself. And in that moment, telling my story to the producer and the cameraman, I lost it. Like, damn, this is like you really have shitty parents. Like in that moment, it's like it's all sinking in. It's one thing to talk to other people. It's one thing to hear yourself saying it. And it absolutely broke my heart all over again. So I constantly found myself apologizing for makeup crew having to come in there. Like, no, this is your story. You tell it. It was a very raw moment for me, one of the rawest moments ever. Because for once in my lifetime of telling this to other people, I actually heard myself. So we got through it. It took a while, but we got through the interview. And then we basically waited it out. My mother treated this as if it was a vacation. She was out exploring and having a good time. This was a vacation to her. This wasn't about her mending her relationship with her child and making things right. Because let's all face it, it could have went another direction on the show. She could have decided that she wanted to make her amends, even if you had to fake it. But she's true to her form. And I told the producers that she would be, but you can only, an actor is going to forget your lines eventually. You ain't that good. You're going to forget your lines. And she forgot her lines. And boom, the mask came off. But I remember the day of the show. And when I say Dr. Phil is very factual, let me put that in there. It's very facts type of person. I mean, he wanted everything. So everything that you see on that show, he has seen with his own eyes from the bank statements. He had all of those things. When it came up about my mother stealing my money on deployment, which we'll get into those things when I dissect the showdown together on our next segment. But he everything on there he had seen. His producers have reached out to my family and talked to them. So all of this stuff, what you saw on there, he already knows it all to be true. So no matter how much my mother tried to lie, he's like, I've seen it. Like, I've seen it. But I remember the day of the shooting of the show, just feeling brave. Like I wasn't nervous. I was ready to do something that I had not had the strength to do for so many years. And that is stand up to my bully. For the first time, I feel empowered. And I gave myself a pep talk that no matter how this goes, you're going to leave this show feeling damn proud of yourself. That you've done something that not a lot of people are strong enough to do. You stood up to your parents, the two people that gave you life, and the one thing that is so taboo in your community, to stand up to your parents against their abuse. And let me tell you something, and remember who else I was doing it for. It was not just for myself, but for others who had not found their voice. So I was not nervous on the day of the shooting of the show. I was ready. I was the first one. I was the lead of the show. I came on there confident. I'm ready to go. And I remember when they put me by that stage, and for the first time, I got to see my mother's interview. I've never seen any of the footage, anything, until the shooting of the show. And I remember, imagine before you come up on the stage to lead the show and sitting up there with Dr. Phil before anybody else comes out, and the first thing you see before walking on the stage is your mother calling you a bitch, right? You would think in your mind it's something to get you amped up, but little do people know, I've been dealing with this my whole life. So, of course, I can be poised and calm because, one, I know what I say and it's true. And I know I'm not coming on there for them. I'm coming over here for my own healing. I'm asking for help. And that I could act a whole ass at home. I could do all the time. I didn't come out here for this. I came out here for me. And that's where we're going to stop here, because the next segment we got to save for when I start breaking down the show and for you guys to understand that. Thank you for watching. Thank you for supporting. Don't forget to subscribe. Don't forget to like. Don't forget to share. Share. There's so many people that need to hear this. Trust me, I was on the other end. I cannot tell you how many people on here have inspired me by watching them. I still watch them. So please share. There are so many people out here that have not found their voice that need to hear mine amongst many others. God bless. And until next time, I love you guys. Thank you again.